When the Nazis are invading other countries, the U.S. doesn't even have a global intelligence agency. America doesn't really want to enter the war. But make no mistake, Hitler is keeping an eye on the United States. Here's the backstory on how America's first World War II spy helps defeat the Third Reich and inspire James Bond. Rockefeller Center, an iconic Art Deco building in the heart of Manhattan, and an unlikely headquarters for a secret spy ring.
This was the biggest spy operation, foreign spy operation, in American history.
We shall strive to resist him by land and sea. We shall be on his track wherever he goes.
A spy operation set up by British Prime Minister Winston Churchill.
He comes to the conclusion the only way we can win is by getting America into this war.
The British spy ring in New York keeps tabs on Nazi spies trying to gauge America's sentiment about entering World War II. British spy masters get inside information from famous Brits in America like Charlie Chaplin, Cary Grant, and Alfred Hitchcock. But the British spy ring needs an inside guy in the American government, someone with high-level access but a low profile. They need Ernest Cuneo, a former NFL player turned lawyer. He becomes America's first spy of World War II.
He was a very amiable person, but even though he wanted fame as a football player, he slowly realizes that to become truly powerful, to become really effective, he had to become anonymous. He had to become the invisible spy.
When all hope of getting a job is gone, eyes are lowered, hands held out.
After World War I and the Depression, Americans are reluctant to enter the fight against Hitler.
You can't put your head in the sand when you have an Adolf Hitler taking over the world.
There has sprung up from the soil a hatred of the German name and a contempt for the Nazi creed.
Churchill needs help from its most vital ally.
Churchill had a man by the name of William Stevenson. His code name was known as Intrepid.
Author Thomas Mayer says the Nazis already have an edge. They have little trouble recruiting Americans as spies.
It happens here, in Madison Square Garden.
Just look at this German-American rally in Madison Square Garden. 20,000 people.
Part of the German-American boom, and they were supporters of the Nazi, the Hitler regime. They thought we shouldn't get involved, that we should learn to live with the Hitler regime, and of course history proved them totally wrong.
As the bulk of our supplies was directed to England for the forthcoming invasion,
German-American spies target U.S. defense secrets in the late 1930s.
You'd think from the number of spies they've been sending over here that we're at war with Germany. It looks more as if Germany were at war with us.
The 1939 movie Confessions of a Nazi Spy is inspired by the case of U.S. Army Sergeant Gunther Rumrich. He turns himself into the FBI and turns on his team, leading to 18 indictments and 4 convictions. The Rockefeller Center spies include agents who would become famous one day, Ian Fleming, author of James Bond, and Roald Dahl, author of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. They recruit Ernest Cuneo. He plays for the Brooklyn Dodgers football team of the NFL, and then becomes a lawyer with important connections in Washington and in the media.
He was a man who, in many ways, was representative of the deep state. He was one of those figures that was invisible, but he knew how to move the levers of power.
The case that finally awakens the U.S. government, 1941. 2 men are walking through Times Square.
They had a satchel of papers and how they were planning an explosion, very much like 9/11 in Manhattan. And they happened to be walking across Times Square when one of them gets hit by a car. The satchel of papers falls. The other German spy, he picks up the papers and runs off. So now they have a dead spy laying in the street.
The case inspires the 1945 movie The House on 92nd Street. The FBI doesn't know who these guys are, Remember, the U.S. government doesn't have an international spy agency. But the British spy ring at Rockefeller Center cracks the case. They share it with Cuneo.
And eventually they arrest not only that spy, but about 20 other related Nazi spies, all part of a Nazi spy ring.
But while we guard our shores against threats of war,
Despite Nazi spies in Times Square, President Roosevelt still has to navigate the nation's isolationist views.
I hate war.
That's what he's saying on the stump. But privately, he recognizes that Hitler is growing, that he's got to be stopped.
The strategy? A propaganda war. And the battlefield is primarily New York.
Today we rule Germany. Tomorrow, the world.
The Nazis recognize its importance. Words that incite instead of enlighten. But propaganda is an invisible weapon of both sides, a vital tool of espionage.
Germany's last stand will not be on a battlefield. It will be a cringing plea for mercy.
Cuneo feeds information to newspapers, as well as famous radio announcers like Walter Winchell and Drew Pearson. Hitchcock makes Saboteur to reflect the isolationist mood in America. Biographers say Cary Grant spies on Errol Flynn and his Nazi connections. Movie theaters play newsreels like the March of Time to show what is going on in Germany. The propaganda war also includes espionage tactics like creating fake maps. The British create a fake German map to convince the world that Nazis want to take control of parts of the Western Hemisphere.
And this was also a way of getting the Americans even more anxious about the Nazi threat. It wasn't only going to happen in Europe, but they were going to divide up South America.
This passion for conquest reached its hysterical climax when Adolf Hitler enthroned himself as God and the German Führer.
Cuneo has another idea. Obtain insurance documents that will include blueprints of sensitive enemy targets.
Ernest Cuneo arguably was already at war. About a year and a half before Pearl Harbor, he was already working with the British spies at Rockefeller Center.
Near Niagara Falls, the Brits set up Camp X, a training camp for spies. Much like you've seen in James Bond movies.
This was where British agents were taught the black arts of how to murder people, how to, if you get behind the scenes, how to hit people in the head, how to stab people, how to do all these different type of things that a spy needs to do when they're working undercover. We had none of that.
Colonel Norris's Office of Strategic Services is sorting all available photos of war areas.
Roosevelt creates the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor of the CIA. But when World War II is over, President Truman wants to disband it. That's when a Soviet defection of Igor Gouzenko reveals the Americans' Russian ally is really a threat. The Cold War begins.
It really shook the United States government and realized that, wow, Russia may be fighting in the war with us. They may be ostensibly our ally, but they really are our frenemy because they are planning to have their own expansion. It basically showed that the Soviets were really good at espionage, that they put a lot of double agents into this country, and that we had better be prepared.
Once upon a time, spying or espionage was a fairly straightforward game. But we have come a long way rather quickly from Mata Hari.
President Truman realizes the need for an international spy agency, and the OSS eventually becomes the Central Intelligence Agency in 1947. After the war, Ernest Cuneo and his old spy friend Ian Fleming reminisce about their exciting war adventures, but legally can't talk about them publicly.
Ian Fleming later said that if he had written the James Bond books any more based upon reality, he would have been arrested. So a lot of the former spies, like Ian Fleming, Ernest Cuneo, they felt this was the most alive moment in their lives.
I admire your luck, Mr.
Bond.
James Bond.
Ian Fleming creates Agent 007, James Bond. Fleming asks Cuneo to show him around Chicago, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles as background for his spy novels.
The first spy book of Bond, Casino Royale, recreates some of the experiences that Fleming had working at Rockefeller Center.
Rockefeller Center. There is a bust of aviation hero Charles Lindbergh, despite being a Nazi sympathizer. There's no tribute to Cuneo, the connection between Churchill's spy ring here and the White House. Cuneo is invisible, the invisible spy. Thomas Mayer's book is called The Invisible Spy.